There I am. There I is.
They fixed you.
They fixed me. Well, that's a whole different thing.
Who's doing the announcements or whatever?
I think, Doug, are you doing the announcements? Doug is.
Put me on the prayer list, please. I'm doing all kinds of battery tests before I go to here.
At the carotid? Yeah.
Because of my heart, with my heart murmuring.
Yeah.
They're worried about it because they were going to use it to lost me. But with my heart, they're just a little bit afraid to put me to sleep.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd just pray and
Yep. Yep.
see things work out.
Okay. Well, other people will pick up as they come in, but we'll pick up in Isaiah. Okay. So this section is God's promise to bring peace. First part. I kind of broke it up so that I kind of introduced the different areas as far as what it is. Because remember, Isaiah bounces around. It's the present for Isaiah. It's the future, and it could be several different futures. So we'll kind of stay on the right one. This is looking forward to a future. Right here. So, but there will be no more gloom for her who is in anguish. In earlier times, he treated the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali with contempt. But later he shall make it glorious. By the way of the sea, on the other side of the Jordan, Galilee of the Gentiles. So you notice where Zebulun and Naphtali are. They're right here. Here's Naphtali, and here's Zebulun, and here's the Sea of Galilee. And right here is Nazareth. So kind of when you look at the map, and you put it together what he's talking about, who's the her Isaiah is referring to? There'll be no more gloom for her who is in anguish. And her would be referring to the people in Zebulun and Naphtali. Because the Assyrians had come down and captured them. Matter of fact, they captured them. They went all the way through Issachar, Manasseh, all the way to Ephraim, in south, all the way through. So, but who's the her? Wouldn't that be his people? Supposedly his people, but the people that were there, that were still looking to follow God. Not all of them. There's a remnant. But those people are in anguish because they've got Assyrians in control, bringing their gods. Okay, how did he treat with contempt the land? And who's the he? God. How did he treat the land with contempt? Remember, we'll get into this later, but you had Tiglath-Pileser, you had Sennacherib, and you had Sargon. Three successive, actually it was Tiglath-Pileser, Sargon, and then Sennacherib. They were all Assyrians. They were all expanding the empire of Assyria. And God allowed them to go in there. They were his instrument, if you will. How will he make the land glorious? This is looking forward. Who grew up there? From about 12 on. Jesus. The people who walk in darkness will see a great light. Those who live in dark land, the light will shine on them. You shall multiply the nation. You shall increase their gladness. They will be glad in your presence, as with the gladness of harvest, as men rejoice when they divide the spoil. For you shall break the yoke of the burden and the staff on their shoulders, the rod of their oppressor, as at the battle of Midian. So, how are those who walk in the darkness see again?
The light.
The light. Who's the light?
God.
Which part? Huh? Which part of Jesus? Which part of God?
Jesus.
Jesus. So he's the light that's going to come. He grew up there. How will the nation be multiplied? Remember in Daniel? Daniel also makes the same kind of prophecy. You had the statue that had all the different metals that were associated with it, and the stone that was not cut from hands, that smashed it, and it rose to be a mountain. Same thing. But how is the nation multiplied? Where did it start? Started with Jesus. Started with the Jews in Jerusalem. But then Paul came. And Peter was given a lesson. And it was expanded to Gentiles. And it multiplied. It really, really grew all over the world, as opposed to just being the nation of Israel. What's the yoke? The staff, the rod of the oppressor that will be broken from them. This is figurative. What's the yoke?
Probably the law.
The law. It was the Old Testament law. Nothing wrong with the law. What was wrong was us. We couldn't keep it. And he's going to break that yoke that they never could keep and bring in a new law. Law of love. This is out of Numbers, but this is the people of Midian. And in verse 18, I underlined that. For they have been hostile to you with their tricks, with which they deceive you in the affair of Peor and in the affair of Cosbi. So these were people who came in that tricked the Jews. Okay. So this was Midian, and was not in their, Midian was against them. This is for the sons of Israel on and like that. It goes on to against Midian, just as the Lord had commanded. Killed the kings of the Midian, Evi and Rechem and Zur and Hur, and Balaam the son of Beor. And with the sword, the sons of Israel captured the women of Midian, and you can read the rest of it on. So they destroyed Midian for the Lord because of what they had done. So when he's talking about that utter destruction, that's what Christ is going to do to the law, is he will utterly destroy it.
Wasn't that the golden calf that they were?
No, this was much, much, much later after the golden calf. But that was the Israelites that did it themselves.
Yeah.
This is a group that went in and they did leverage Balaam in order to help pull the Israelites away from God and towards their gods. So, back to Isaiah. For every boot of the booted warrior in the battle tumult and the cloak rolled in blood will be for burning, fuel for the fire. For a child will be born to us, a son will be given us, and the government will rest on his shoulders, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Eternal Father, Prince of Peace. There'll be no end to the increase of his government or of peace. On the throne of David and over his kingdom, to establish it, to uphold it with justice and righteousness, for then on and forevermore. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will accomplish this. You can see when the Jews were reading Isaiah, how they could get off on the wrong foot of understanding what it means. How did they interpret this? Didn't they interpret this as being a physical kingdom? There'll be no end to his increase of his government or his peace. In other words, he's going to be like David, but he's going to be super David. He'll be on his throne over his kingdom. And you could understand how they interpret this to say, this is a physical kingdom. And it isn't. It's a spiritual kingdom. But you can see how they would do that. What does it mean the cloak rolled in blood from the battle will be for burning? It goes along with the theme in this particular paragraph. If you're at peace, do you need a warrior's cloak anymore?
No.
No. What it means is you can burn it. You don't need it anymore. It's all at peace. Can I ask it? So who's that wonderful counselor, mighty God, eternal Father, Prince of Peace? Yeah, it's Jesus. Why will there be no end to the increase of his government? What government? The spiritual kingdom. Us. His church. Is called out. So it will continue to increase over the centuries, over the millennia, since he died and was resurrected. And that's what it's talking about. In Romans, Paul makes some references to it. Oh, the depth of the riches, both the wisdom and knowledge of God. How unsearchable are his judgments and unfathomable his ways. For who has known the mind of the Lord, or who became his counselor? Did I ask that question? Who was his counselor? Christ. So Paul is referring to Christ here. How does that relate to 9? Chapter 9, Isaiah. Do I need to go back? Clive said it, yeah, wonderful counselor. It's a direct relation to it. And in this one, these things I have spoken to you while abiding with you, out of John. But the Helper, the Holy Spirit, whom the Father will send in my name, he will teach you these things and bring to your remembrance all that I said to you. Peace I leave with you. My peace I give you. Not as the world gives, do I give you. So what's he saying? Do I ask that? What peace does he give? Spiritual peace. Yes, not peace with the world. He never promised peace with the world, which is why he said, not as the world do, I give to you. In other words, it's not going to be worldly peace. How did most of the apostles die? All of them but one that I know of was killed, which was John. But John was banished to Patmos, where he lived out his life. So that wasn't peace. So the relationship back to 9 is, he's the Prince of Peace. Why is he the Prince? Because the Father is the King. And he does the will of the Father. So, God's wrath. So he changes gear. First of all, he's talking about way in the future. But this is God's wrath who rejected him. And it kind of would have been maybe a good idea when the writers did it, to split this up in a different chapter, because there's no chapters in the original writings. There's no punctuation in the original writings. But this is a break. Now he's talking about the present. The Lord sends a message against Jacob, and it falls on Israel, and all the people know it. That is, Ephraim and the inhabitants of Samaria, asserting in pride and in arrogance of heart. The bricks have fallen down, but we will rebuild with smooth stones. The sycamores have been cut down, but we will replace them with cedars. Therefore the Lord raises against them adversaries from Rezin, and spurs their enemies on. The Armenians on the east, and the Philistines on the west, and they devour Israel with gaping jaws. In spite of all this, his anger does not turn away, and his hand is still stretched out. Who are the adversaries of Rezin? Rezin was the king of Aram. It was just north of Israel. And the adversaries of Aram are Assyria. And at this particular time, it would have been Tiglath-Pileser, which is the king of Assyria. And he's expanding the kingdom. So what it says is they're coming from the north, down through there. They're coming from the west, and they're coming from the east. They're closing in from three sides. How come they're not closing in from the south? Huh? It's Judah. They wouldn't attack Israel, but they're being attacked from three sides. And it's because God's angry with them, because they're arrogant. They've latched on to the idols of the land. They've left God, and he said, okay, you're going to see what it's like. You're going to see what it's like without me protecting you. So who or what is being devoured? The people there. Isn't it? Okay. Yet the people do not turn back to him who struck them, nor do they seek the Lord of hosts. So they're not getting it. All this is going on, and they're just they're continuing on with what they've been doing. So the Lord cuts off head and tail from Israel, both palm and branch and bulrush in a single day. The head is the elder and honorable man, and the prophet who teaches falsehood is the tail. For those who guide this people are leading them astray, and those who are guided by them are brought to confusion. Therefore the Lord does not take pleasure in their young men, nor does he have pity on their orphans or their widows, for every one of them is godless and an evildoer, and every mouth is speaking foolishness. In spite of all this, his anger does not turn away, and his hand is still stretched out. Biblical definition of foolishness, what is that? The person who says there is no God is a fool. So how did the people respond to being chastened by the Lord through Assyrian? They didn't change anything. So who's leading them astray? The elders. The people they revere are the ones who are leading them away from God. The people who should be leading them towards God are leading them away. So what's God's response to their evil? First of all, he's going to cut off the false prophets, and he's going to cut off the leadership. They'll be leaderless. For wickedness burns like a fire. It consumes the briars and the thorns. It even sets the thickets of the forest aflame, and they roll upward in a column of smoke. But the fury of the Lord of hosts, the land is burned up, and the people are like fuel for the fire. No man spares his brother. They slice off what is in the right hand, but are still hungry. And they eat what is on the left hand, but they are not satisfied. Each of them eats the flesh of his own arm. Manasseh devours Ephraim, and Ephraim, Manasseh. And together they are against Judah. In spite of all this, his anger does not turn away, and his hand is still stretched out. So that verse has been here a couple of times, that last verse. So how is wickedness like a fire?
It consumes everything.
Yep. How does a fire start? Spark. Really, really small. But if there's lots of fuel, it spreads fast. It started small by the inhabitants that were there that should not have been there, and the people were open to it. They were the fuel, and that fire just burned through them. What does it mean his hand is still stretched out? You can interpret that two ways. What'd you say, Pam? Well, that would be to say, I'm here, my hand's out for you. I don't think it means that. His hand is still stretched out where he's going to slap him down. Vengeance is what God right now is in, because the people will not turn away. His hand is still stretched out in the fact that he's still using Assyria to punish them. Yeah. Wanda says, her Bible says, it is still raised up. So when you look at it from that perspective, he says, you're not getting it yet. Okay, Assyria, God's instrument. So we'll talk some more about this particular one. I think I'm doing pretty good here. I think I'll get through my slides today. Okay, so we're in chapter 10. That was 9. 9 talked about Christ coming, but that was the future. And then he talked about, but right now, you're being punished. That area is being punished where Christ is going to come, because they won't turn away from the gods they're pursuing. And they're arrogant about it. Woe to those who enact evil statutes and to those who constantly record unjust decisions, so as to deprive the needy of justice and to rob the poor of my people of their rights, so that widows may be their spoil, and that they may plunder the orphans. Now what will you do in the day of punishment, and in the devastation which will come from afar? For whom will you flee for help? And where will you leave your wealth? Nothing remains but to crouch among the captives or fall among the slain. In spite of all this, his anger does not turn away, and his hand is still stretched out. So how are the poor, the widow, the orphans being treated? Who has treated them that way, and why? I heard you say something, but I didn't hear it. They're the weak ones, okay? They're the ones who can't defend themselves, right? Who's doing it? Leadership. The ones who are rich, the ones that have power. They're preying on their own people. The people they should be taken care of, they aren't. They're taking everything they've got. What little they've got, they're taking it away. This is in Syria, when the Assyrians are going to come down. But does this sound familiar to a time later than the Assyrian Empire? What's it like in Christ's time? Same thing. Same thing's happening. Woe to Assyria, the rod of my anger and the staff in whom hands is against a godless my fury to capture booty, to trample them down like mud. Not so intend, nor does it plan so. It is its purpose. Many nations. This is a woe to Assyria.
God may use them to cut off Israel, but he'll get back on it. They're godless and they'll never know God.
They're godless, and they aren't doing it because they want to serve God. They're going to get their, as we say sometimes, they're going to get their comeuppance. So who's the godless nation? Assyria. So, for it says, are not my princes all kings? Is not Calno like Charchemish, or Hamath like Arpad, or Samaria like Damascus? As my hand has reached to the kingdoms of the idols, whose graven images were greater than those of Jerusalem and Samaria, shall I not do to Jerusalem and her images, just as I have done to Samaria and her idols? So if you see on the map, I don't have a map on there, Calno or Carchemish or Hamath or Arpad, but they're in line with the orange of the Assyrian Empire. And you can see where it's coming down. And you can see Damascus is directly south. Directly south of that is Samaria, and directly south of that is Jerusalem. So you can see the progression of the Assyrian Empire down through Israel and into Judah. Who are those who are kings princes to? What's he saying? What he's saying is, the Assyrian kings are doing my will, whether they know it or not. They're doing my will. They're serving me in what I want done. What do you think the three comparisons have in common? It's in verse 9. They all really show a progression. Or Samaria like Damascus, that's the one we're familiar with. Where was Damascus? It was in Aram, which is just south of the Assyrian Empire. And the king of Judah, we read this back, a chapter or two ago, went and talked to the king of Assyria, which would have been Tiglath-Pileser, and said, hey, would you take Aram? They're our enemy. Would you just go in there and take them? That's when he took Damascus. But he didn't stop there. He kept moving south. So just like Assyria took Damascus, they're going to take Samaria. They're going to take the next bite. And when they get that one, they're going to take the next bite. And they're going to eat all the way down into Egypt, eventually. That was the final comparison. Jerusalem's next. So this is one I had produced and shown you from last time I was here. You can see where Tiglath-Pileser is at the particular time. Shalmaneser was not necessarily somebody that they had much dealing with. He was more with the north than Tiglath-Pileser moved in there. Then you had Sargon that moved farther. And then you had Sennacherib, lots written about Sennacherib, relatively speaking. So you have all these kings that are in the Assyrian or Neo-Assyrian Empire. So you can see how it expanded all the way down. Eventually it gets into Egypt and goes quite far down into, I guess that would be into, would that be Ethiopia going to the south? I don't remember my geography that well. So you've got that area, and it's interesting, you can see to the east of Judah, which is this region here. How come he didn't expand there? It's a desert. Not much reason to expand into a desert. But all the other areas, his expansion into Elam became Iran. It was the Persian Empire, the heart of the Persian Empire. So you have that aqua and that blue is where the Mede-Persian Empire started. But in Assyria, just a little bit to the east of that red spot that's up there by the name Assyria, is another kingdom that's going to rise up and be big. So it will be that when the Lord has completed all his work on Mount Zion and on Jerusalem, he will say, I will punish the fruit of the arrogant heart of the king of Assyria and the pomp of his haughtiness. So that's the woe. When it's done, I'm going to come back to him. For he had said, by the power of my hand and my wisdom I did this, for I have understanding, and I have removed the boundaries of the peoples and plundered their treasures, and like a mighty man I brought down their inhabitants. Did we have another king that did that same thing? It was arrogant. It's written about in the Bible. Another pagan king. In Daniel. Nebuchadnezzar. He's doing the exact same things. Look at all the things I did. And like that, he says, You don't understand. It's only because I let you. And my hand reaches to the riches of the people like a nest. And as one gathers abandoned eggs, I gathered all the earth, and there was not one that flapped its wing or opened its beak or chirped. So he says, nothing stood in my way. Look at all I did. I can take anything I want. God's going to say, no, I'm going to fix that. So, what does God intend to do? What do you think he intends to do?
He'll do with them.
What, yeah, but what's he going to do? He's going to wipe out the Assyrian Empire. Is the axe to boast itself of the one who chops it with it? Is the saw to exalt itself over the one who wields it? That would be like a club wielding those who lift it, or a rod lifting him who is not wood. Therefore the Lord, the God of hosts, will send a wasting disease among his stout warriors. And under his glory a fire will be kindled like a burning flame. And the light of Israel will become a fire, and his Holy One a flame. And it will burn and devour his thorns and his briars in a single day. And he will destroy the glory of his forest and of all his fruitful garden, both soul and body. And it will be as when a sick man wastes away. And the rest of the trees of the forest will be so small in number that a child could write them down. Assuming a child can't count very high, that's why a child could write them down. So, what's the comparison of the axe, saw, club, rod to the one wielding it mean? Well, it's strength. It's a metaphor. Who is the axe, saw, club, and rod? Huh? Nope. He's the one who wields it, is the creator. Who are the axe, saw, club, and the rod in the context of what we're studying right now in Isaiah 10? The Assyrian kings. The axe and the saw and the club and the rod are saying, look what I did. And he's saying, no, you didn't do that. The one who wielded it did it. And it was through you, as a club, as an axe, as a saw, as a rod, to do chastening. But you didn't do it. You were used to do it. So that's the point he's making here. So what is the fire that is kindled, and who will kindle it? Wouldn't that be the people who want to serve God? That's his point behind it, is to turn people away from their evil back to him. And when that fire starts, God will kindle that fire. It'll grow. A remnant returns. I'm doing real well. I'll be done early. Hate to say that though. Now in that day, the remnant of Israel and those of the house of Jacob who have escaped will never again rely on the one who struck them, but will truly rely on the Lord, the Holy One of Israel. A remnant will return, the remnant of Jacob, to the mighty God. For through your people, O Israel, may be like the sand of the sea. Only a remnant within them will return. A destruction is determined, overflowing with righteousness. For a complete destruction, one that is decreed, the Lord of hosts will execute in the midst of the whole land. So who will return? How will they be different? Let me see if I asked that one. No. The remnant that returns, they're there right now, in Judah, right? Are they going to stay there? Are they going to get captured? and taken back somewhere. What kingdom follows the Assyrian kingdom? It's one we all know well if we've studied the book of Daniel. It's the Babylonian kingdom. It's Nebuchadnezzar. And they'll be in captivity for 70 years. And a remnant will come back. And that remnant, what's the intent of that remnant? What's the first thing they want to do? They rebuild the temple. Then they get to the walls. But the first thing they want to do is rebuild the temple. That's a remnant that has said, we want to serve God. What is a complete destruction? Why is it overflowing with righteousness? What happens? This is really jump to the future, if I've interpreted it right. I think this looks forward to 70 AD. Total destruction of the Israeli state as an entity. Didn't get reconstituted to some extent until, 1947? Up until that time, it didn't exist. Therefore, thus saith the Lord of hosts, O my people who dwell in Zion, do not fear the Assyrian who strikes you with a rod and lifts up his staff against you. So again, he's got the comparison to the rod and staff that he just had earlier in the chapter, the way Egypt did. For in a very little while, my indignation against you will be spent, and my anger will be directed to their destruction. The Lord of hosts will arouse a scourge against him like the slaughter of Midian on the rock of Oreb. And his staff will be over the sea, and he will lift up the way he did in Egypt. So it will be in that day that his burden will be removed from your shoulders and his yoke from your neck, and his yoke will be broken because of fatness. So what is God's promise to those people? This is the present. It's going to happen in the near future. He's still on the part where he's saying what's going to happen to the Assyrian Empire. Okay. And who will God use to destroy the Assyrians? Nebuchadnezzar. What's going to happen to the persecution the Assyrians have if they've got the Babylonian kingdom attacking them? How much attention are they going to pay to what's going on in Israel? Not much. Not much. So the yoke and everything that's being put on them, it's going to get a little bit better for a while. But they don't change a whole lot. And because they don't change a whole lot, they get taken into captivity for 70 years. Up until this time, Jerusalem has not fallen. The one who took Jerusalem was Nebuchadnezzar in the Babylonian Empire. So, he has come against Aiath. He has passed through Migron. At Michmash, he deposited his baggage. They have gone through the pass, saying, Geba will be our lodging place. Ramah is terrified, and Gibeah of Saul has fled away. Cry aloud with your voice, O daughter of Galem. Pay attention, Laishah, and wretched Anathoth. Madmenah has fled. The inhabitants of Gebim have sought refuge. Yet today he will halt at Nob. He shakes his fist at the mountain of the daughter of Zion, the hill of Jerusalem. So where are all these cities? Where are these at? Galem, Geba, Ramah. Little map here. This is Jerusalem in the red on the left, your left. And then you have an area that's off to the right. Clive. I talked to you about this on Monday. This circle here is where all these cities are. In this little area that's just east of Jerusalem. That would be in the southwest portion of Benjamin, because Jerusalem kind of butts up right to the corner up there between Judah and Benjamin. The tribes of Judah and Benjamin, the two areas of those. That's where it butts up to. What area is this referred to in the New Testament? Anybody know? It's called the Mount of Olives. What's noteworthy in the Mount of Olives? The Garden of Gethsemane. Who's the he referred to here? Yet he will haunt at Nob. He shakes his hand at the mountain of the daughter of Zion, the hill of Jerusalem. He condemned them. Who's the he? Who went in this particular area a lot? Whenever he came down to Jerusalem, to the temple. Jesus. That's who he's talking about. Behold, the Lord, the God of hosts, will lop off the boroughs with a terrible crash. Those who are tall in stature he will cut down, and those who are lofty will be abased. He will cut down the thickets of the forest with an iron axe, and Lebanon will fall by the mighty one. What event do you think Isaiah is referring to here? This is my last slide. Lop off the boroughs with a terrible crash. Those who are tall in stature will cut down. Those who are lofty will be abased. Huh? No, he just talked about Christ. Where would this follow? Who are the ones who killed Christ? The arrogant leadership. Who are the ones who led the revolt and really pushed hard against the Romans? Same arrogant leadership. And it cost them. How did it cost them? The Romans said, enough. And they crushed them. That was 70 AD. That's when Israel as a country ceased to exist. The people that were there still were either killed, taken into captivity as slaves, and sold out throughout the rest of the empire. Basically, Israeli culture evaporated almost in a year. I think it's about how long it took Titus and Vespasian to raise Jerusalem to the ground. So I think that's what he's talking about here is the first thing that comes is Christ that's going to be in these areas there. He's going to condemn those who are in Jerusalem because they're leading the people astray. What did he say to the Pharisees all through the New Testament? You're a generation of vipers. You're supposed to be leading them to God, and you don't. It's the blind leading the blind. They're going to take you right into a pothole and everything like that. So he's condemning them, and this is what I believe Isaiah is talking about here, is eventually they're going to pay for it. Just like Assyria paid for it with his Babylonian Empire, he's going to use the Roman Empire to punish those Jews. And that's 25. And I finished. It usually the iron axe usually points to the Roman Empire.